Once upon a time, in a summer long ago, the wheat fields were golden, the oats were green, and the hay was stacked high in the meadows. A magnificent old manor house stood surrounded by woods and ponds. The reeds had grown so high that summer that they nearly hid the water from view. Hidden in the reeds, a mother duck had made her nest, safe from weasels and the wily fox. She sat on her eggs, getting rather bored, for they took their time to hatch. Finally, she felt a tap, 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 and cracks started to appear in the smooth shells. With a pop and a peep, peep, a bunch of golden ducklings appeared. Their mother gave a delighted quack as she counted each fluffy gold head. But wait, the largest egg in the nest, her secret pride, was still there. Never before could she remember laying such a huge and splendid egg. How much longer would it take? Suddenly, there was a tap and a crack and a pop. The ducklings and their mother excitedly awaited the arrival of their final sibling, but they quacked with horror at the baby bird who emerged. For he was big and grey and ugly. He had huge feet and a broad beak and looked nothing like his brothers and sisters. The next day, the weather was perfectly splendid, and the ducklings went for their first swim. One by one, they plunged into the water, bobbing along in a golden line. Even the big grey duckling could swim. Despite his ungainly size, he held himself upright in a graceful style. Mother Duck quacked with delight. "See how nicely he uses those big feet. He is my very own son after all. Now follow me closely and watch out for the cat." The duck family waddled on their way into the yard. The sight of the big grey duckling caused an immediate commotion. "How strange he is," the other ducks said. "Look at his huge feet and his dull grey feathers. We won't stand for such an ugly fellow in our yard." And a handsome drake flew over and nipped him in the neck. "Leave him alone. He's not doing any harm," quacked Mother Duck. "He's too big and strange," the handsome drake replied, "and therefore he needs a good whacking." An elderly mallard peered down her beak at Mother Duck's brood. "Your other children are very pretty," she said, "but not that one. He's the wrong shape. It's a pity you can't hatch him again." Mother Duck was sad. She knew he was big and grey and ugly, but he was still her little duckling. Alas, life only got worse for the poor ugly duckling. Every day he was pecked and pushed and jeered and joshed by the ducks and even the chickens. "He's too big, he's too ugly," they clucked. Gobbler the turkey was the worst. He puffed up like a ship under full sail and gobbled at him until he was red in the face. One day, the poor ugly duckling could take it no more. He ran far away from home until he ended up at a swamp where only wild ducks lived. "You're an ugly fellow," the wild ducks told him, "but you can stay here, so long as you don't marry any of us." But the poor ugly duckling wasn't thinking of marriage. He just wanted to hide away in the reeds where no one could see him and mock him. One day, a pair of traveling geese stopped by. "Hello, friend," they honked. "You're so ugly that we rather like you. Why don't you become traveling birds like us?" They told him of a wonderful marsh nearby, full of charming lady geese. "They'll adore you," the kind geese promised. But just as the three birds took flight, there was a terrible bang, bang of gunshots ringing in the air. The duckling's new friends dropped down dead into the rushes, and the waters ran red with their blood. Immediately, hunters and gun dogs came splashing through the swamp. The poor ugly duckling was terrified, but there was no time to hide in the reeds. One dog bared sharp fangs right at him and opened his wide jaws, but just as he was about to bite the duckling, he suddenly turned and ran off. "I'm so ugly that even a dog won't eat me," the poor duckling thought. He didn't know whether to be glad or sad. Winter arrived, bitterly cold. The water froze, and one night the duckling got stuck in the ice. He sat there until morning, when a farmer caught sight of him. He broke the ice with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to warm him by the fireside. But the duckling was terrified. He fluttered into the milk pail, splashing it all over the room, and landed in the butter tub. The farmer's wife was furious and chased him out into the cold. Back in the swamp, he spent a long and lonely winter, struggling to survive. At last the snows melted away and the larks began to sing. It was spring, and the duckling unfolded his wings. They were bigger and stronger than before and carried him high into the air. Before long, he found himself by a lovely lake, surrounded by lilacs and apple blossom. 3 magnificent swans, white and graceful, swam there. Their beauty filled the ugly duckling with despair. "I'm so drab and grey, they will peck me to death," he thought. "Though perhaps it's better to be killed by these majestic birds than scorned and starved." He bowed his head in misery, but as he did so, he suddenly saw his reflection in the water and got a shock. His ugly feathers were now snowy white. His neck was curved and slender. He had grown into a swan. The other swans glided over to him. Instead of biting him, they stroked him with their beaks. Nearby children shouted with joy at the sight of him. "There's a new swan," they cried, and threw him some crumbs. "Once I was an ugly duckling," he said, "and now I am the most beautiful of birds." But because he knew what it was like to be shunned and bullied, he was never cruel to another creature, and became the noblest of swans that ever lived.